All right, let's go ahead and get into the guided practice. So here I provided for you a reference that we're going to be using. It's a shape still life using a sphere, a cylinder, and a cube, or as you know it, a rectangular prism. We're not going to worry about any of the shading unless you want to, but that is optional. We just want to focus on drawing the sphere, the cylinder, and the rectangular prism using lines. In addition to that, we also want to make sure that we are keeping the proportion of the sphere, cylinder, and cube from like with one another, right? So I'm going to start with the sphere. I like to start with the smallest object because the smallest object can fit into other objects, whereas it's harder to try to fit a larger object into a smaller object. What I mean by that is, first, I'm going to start with the cross, as we normally do. Find the radius. Okay, so there's my radius. Copy it over. And there we go. And now I'm going to do my quarters. So all of this stuff should be review for you. What I'm doing right now anyway. But this is most likely going to be larger than the spheres that you have drawn so far in my class. So there's our bottom quarter, and then here is the second half of the bottom quarter. Let's go ahead and fix it up. Okay. So as I was drawing it, you'll notice that the lines that I was using were pretty rough, pretty sketchy. You can see it's still kind of messy, right? And some of you guys usually stop here and say you're done, okay? But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start to clean up our lines. So I'm actually going to lightly erase everything, leaving behind sort of a ghost that I can then use as a reference. And now I'm going to make much more confident lines, intentional confident lines, tracing over the guidelines that we see there. So the more times you pick up your pencil, the less confident your lines are going to be, right? And I'll show you a non-example in a second. Again, just following that line that we had earlier. Okay. Notice for that one, I probably did a few too many lines. You can see that it's a little bit messier, right? And then for this one here as well. Just going over it one more time. Okay, so here we have a clean circle, much cleaner than we had before, right? I'm just gonna show you like a non-example right now. Let's say we draw our circle here. I'm just gonna do a quick drawing. Just to get you guys a circle using the lines that you normally use, or that I've seen you guys normally use. It's not everyone, but you want to avoid keeping these sort of lines in your final product. Okay, so that, let's say we have our circle there, right? Same thing as before, I'm going to erase it so that it leaves behind a ghost image that we can then use as a reference. Compare the two spheres here, right? Although this is faster, and for you, some of you guys, it's a habit, let's compare these two, right? Looks more polished, looks more finished, and that's why we do that, okay? So don't do this. We're gonna erase it now. Now, next thing we're gonna do is we're going to draw in our cylinder. we want to make sure that we keep the proportion or the size of the cylinder relative to the size of the sphere the same, okay? Some of you guys tend to like try to make everything fit. Like let's say I made this too big, which I think I actually did, right? If I make this too big, then some of you guys might think, oh, I need to fit the entire cylinder in, so I'm gonna shrink the cylinder, okay? But what you wanna do is first measure the size of the sphere compared to the size of the cylinder, okay? So I can fit the sphere into the cylinder 1 and about 1/4 times, okay? So now I'm gonna take my sphere and count like let's back up. If I go back to the sphere, the cylinder kind of starts a little under halfway on this sphere. So I'm gonna go a little under halfway, right? And that's where the bottom of my cylinder is gonna be. So I'm gonna mark that. This is the bottom of my cylinder, right? This is the top of my sphere, right? This is the diameter of the sphere. So that's 1. And now I'm gonna take about like a third, I wanna say, yeah, a third of the sphere. If I were to split it into, you know, a fraction, a third, and the top of my cylinder would go all the way up there. So I'm actually not even gonna see it. So all I'm gonna see down here is the elliptical base at the bottom. And then I'm gonna see the parallel lines. So where do I put the parallel line? Why did I decide to put it here? Looking at the reference, right? It's about a third of the way down, or a third of the way to the right of that sphere, okay? You could also check the width, right? And compare the width to the cylinder. It's actually a little bit bigger than the width of the cylinder. So if I look at this, shrink it down a little, and that would be approximately how wide my cylinder is, right? And here, again, I'm just doing like a sketch, which is why my lines look the way they look, but I have the proportions down so far. All right, now let's do the rectangular prism. Looking at the sphere, right? I already have a sphere here. So let's see how many times the sphere will fit into the rectangular prism. So that central Y is approximately the height of the sphere. So I'm gonna take this line here and about here. So I'm gonna mark this spot and this spot. And this is where that first line of the central Y starts, right? Since it is a cube, these lines should be pretty close, right? But we wanna measure it. If I make it too long, then I'm gonna get a rectangular prism here. So let's see how big this line is, about 2/3. So 2/3 of this line here, right? So it's gonna go outside of the box. So notice again, I'm not trying to just make it fit into the page. I am trying to, again, 2/3. I'm trying to make sure I keep the proportions. So 2/3, sorry. Okay, about here. Okay, and then I'm just gonna do the parallel line rule that I did before. So this line goes about to here if I use the reference, and then this line should be parallel to this line. Okay, if you need to redraw or relabel, right? Just so some of you guys who might need it, A is parallel here, and then C is parallel here. I'm not gonna have another B line. This is B as well. I'm not gonna have another B line here. I'm just gonna have another C, and then another A right here. So the hard part here though is now I need to remember where the line goes. So this distance or this length should be the same as this one. So about here, right? And then I just need to make it parallel. like so. Okay, now I erase the excess, erase the labels, and we have a line drawing of this still life. Okay, I'm also going to erase this part of the cylinder here because it should be covered by the rectangular prism there. Okay, so there we have our proportions correct, right? But now we need to work on our lines. Sorry, this one is not fully parallel there. Now we need to work on our lines, okay? So there's different ways you can use lines. If you use really thin lines, so I'm just gonna erase this and then make really light, thin lines, like so. Right? Notice that this sphere, which I am now going to give a darker, thicker line by using the side of the pencil. Let me put this in the sharpener. And I'm using the side of the pencil to get that thicker pencil line. It makes the circle or the sphere here stand out and come forward a lot more than that cylinder. So things with outlines or thicker lines get emphasized, while things with thinner lines are more subdued, or they go backwards in your image, right? Notice that you're seeing this sphere a lot more than you're seeing that cylinder. It's standing out a lot more than the cylinder. Okay, so I'm going to use my eraser to clean it up, even it out a bit. Think of your eraser as a tool, guys. Don't think of it as like, oh, it just fixes mistakes. I'm using the eraser to really shape the lines that I have here, right? So I wanted my sphere to stand out because it's closer to us, so I gave it darker lines. I'm going to do the same thing here with the rectangular prism because it's close to us as well, right? Giving it a darker, heavier line weight. All right, I'm not doing the chicken scratch, right? I want to emphasize that. I'm just going over the line multiple times to really bring out how dark I'm making that line. Okay. So this is just an example of how you can use different types of lines to emphasize certain parts of your drawing. If I made them all, like if I made this cylinder also really dark, then there's not really going to be any difference between them, right? And there's really no point in changing the thickness of the lines. Even if I kept it thin, but just made it darker, you'll notice that the sphere and the rectangular prism will still stand out, right? So the thicker the lines, the more they'll stand out. The darker the lines, the more they'll stand out. You can also use lines to imply some shadow. So I'm going to thin out the top of this sphere's lines right here. All right. If you can see that. Right. Looks like there's some shadow towards the bottom here. There's more weight towards the bottom, right? I can do the same thing with my cube here, my rectangular prism. Okay, thin out the top parts, keep the darkness just so it stands out next to the cylinder there. But I want the bottom of my cube to look like it's got shadow. So I'm going to make the lines at the bottom, or I'm going to keep the thick lines at the bottom, but thin out the lines towards the top. Oh, messed up there. Okay, and there you go. And that's how you, vary your lines, as in like change them, make them different from each other. I'm not using chicken scratch, so I'm creating confident lines. And that's also creating clean lines where you don't see a bunch of like stray stragglers everywhere, right? Having varied lines emphasizes or makes certain things stand out more, while having the same uniform lines will make everything kind of, oh, sorry, hit the camera, will kind of make everything stay in the same place.